have Elizabeth Kennedy and we have Andrew Thompson, and so we will begin our discussion. My name is Kathleen Etienne. I am the founder of Black Lines of Design, an online publication that showcases minority and diverse architects around the globe. I'm also a co-owner of a small company, a two-partner company, BE Planning and Design. And today we want to focus on our young people. We will be giving an open forum for discussion. I have some questions that I'll be asking my panels. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. They'll talk a little bit about the company that they have or work for, their specific discipline, and at the end of the session we'll have a Q&A. So I'm going to ask for you to take your notes, jot down your notes. I'm also going to ask for you to silence your phone. I'm not going to ask you to turn it off because sometimes we have emergencies, but to silence your phones so that we won't have interruptions and so we can have a smooth, open dialogue. So without further ado, I'm going to ask my panels to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their company and what their specific disciplines are.
Well, excuse me. As Kathleen said, my name is Elizabeth Kennedy, sometimes known as the Elizabeth Kennedy. I run a company called, surprise, Elizabeth Kennedy Landscape Architects. We are a professional limited liability corporation. We're also, I understand, the oldest or longest surviving landscape architecture firm headed by a woman of African descent in the country. Yeah. So we're celebrating our 25th anniversary just before New Year's this year. When I was walking over here, we're located in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and that for some of you going to City Tech, we have a long tradition of bringing in students from City Tech to work for us on a short-term basis, long-term basis, internship basis. We have a student with us now. We had students over the summer. We are best known for our cultural facilities and interpretive landscape work. And some of you must be wondering what landscape architecture has to do with you, but I'll get to that in a second. But while we're best known for that, and that's the stuff that's closest to our heart, we do have to pay the bills, and sometimes we have big contracts to just fill in trenches and make sure that the C that's specified is correct. We have recently started working in urban design. This is something that I didn't want to do for many years, and that was a foolish mistake, I'm here to tell you. But suddenly we have two very large urban design projects, and that has required us to bring on people with more architectural backgrounds because the work has to be delivered in Revit. And landscape architects don't use Revit, and we are crying every day. We are always interested in talking to people. As Kathleen starts to ask questions, I can tell you what my extremely demanding criteria are. And to tell you that you survived this, there's somebody sitting in the back row there who used to work for me many years ago when the pipe would burst and we were all sitting in pools of water, right, trying to finish work for the Port Authority.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Andrew Thompson. I'm a product of the New York City public school system. I grew up in Brooklyn, East Flatbush, Canarsie, whatever. I was right on the borderline of it. I went to City Tech. It was my first school. I did actually mechanical engineering, so I have a degree in that. And then I went to Pratt Institute for architecture, and I went to Columbia for my grad in urban design. My first jobs coming out actually worked for a company called Gibson Cox, which is a naval architecture firm. So actually I worked on a destroyer for the Navy. And after that I went to work for the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, where I worked on Towers 1 and 2 for all their fit outs. And then I moved on to another department where I actually worked on the air trade project. So if you go into JFK, the air trade project, I worked on that design with people from the Port Authority. And after that I actually went back to Pratt to teach for about 5 years. So I taught architecture for 5 years at Pratt. And then I went on to Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, where I was their chief architect for 12 years. So if you know about healthcare and what it is, it's just a lot of money, a lot of buildings, a lot of tech, a lot of codes. So that was a real interesting, demanding experience, and we did some good projects out of that. So after I left Sloan Kettering, I went to work for the City University of New York. So I was brought on there to actually build their first community college in 40 years. So they hadn't done a community college in 40 years. So I actually worked with faculty and helped design the school and put the school together. So if you ever go to Bryant Park and you see that black building across the street from Bryant Park, that's the school I helped put together, the faculty. And after that, I live in Jersey now, and so I said I was tired of commuting back and forth to New York, and I got a job in Jersey, so I'm currently the county architect for Passaic County. And if you know what county architects are, if you think about, you hear the term citizen architect or government architects, fit into that category. There are very few of us in the country. In the state of New Jersey, there are only 3 of us. One for Hudson, one for Passaic, and one for Hunterdon County. So I'm there now, force of one. I work with everything from historic rehabilitation to the county jail. And currently I'm doing a brand new public work facility building that is being built on top of an old Army missile base. So as we're digging up the site, we're finding all kind of nice surprises. But that's a real interesting job. And then I'm also working on a courthouse renovation in Paterson. And if you ever come to Paterson, New Jersey, downtown Paterson, you see this beautiful red brick building with this beautiful steep roof. It's only one of 4 in the country. So I'm renovating that for new courthouse use. And glad to be here. I'm just going to talk to you guys about what it is for the transition. I can tell you my experiences and why I'm at the place I am today because of what I did years ago to get there.
So I'm going to try to stop the session just about 10 minutes before 12 so that you can have an opportunity to do your Q&A because Elizabeth has to leave exactly at 12 o'clock. So I will shoot my first question. So you've pursued your degree, as I assume most of you are either doing or have done. You've graduated on time, and now you're ready to start your career. My question to you, either one, if you had to establish a list of ethics for young African American students and young people to obtain a good footing in the architectural industry, what would that list look like?
Well, I think first, networking is key. So relaying my experiences where I'm at today, I was shy as a kid coming up, and I think when I was in high school, I started playing sports, and that kind of got me out of my shyness. When I went to college, especially when I went to architecture school, there was nobody really guiding me to what I needed to do. Either they were telling me I could not be an architect, I wasn't good enough, or you'll get to this place and that'll be it. And actually, I found the New York Coalition of Black Architects, which is the New York chapter of NOMA. And when I first met with them as a student, it was actually myself, Rodney Leone, who's now a real famous architect here in the city, met with them, and there were no students. They actually didn't accept any students. It was just professionals. And they took us under their wing to kind of guide us to what we need to do in the profession. So that networking really is key. And then just working with that organization and going out to different events, you give a card, you talk to somebody, and perfect your resume. But in terms of the ethics, I think always present yourself as a professional. I've had people come interview with me for jobs, and there's some people, they come at me and I right away, in 2 minutes, I'm like, you're not getting this job because you're not presenting yourself the right way, you're not coming across professional. You have to come across professional. You have to want what you're pursuing, and you have to present yourself that way. And I know these days with a lot of things that's happening in our world with Me Too movement and so on, really you have to even present yourself in a manner that will really make people take note of you.
Well, I'm really old school, super duper old school. And so from an ethical standpoint. This is the foundation on which you as a person of integrity should stand. Can you hear me, or should I
It's on.
be on the mic? Is it on?
It's on.
It's on. It's on.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a cold and I can't hear even my own self. Okay, that's a good thing. And so I have to tell you that when I get resumes that say, well, you EKLA, we've striven for 25 years, and, have an intimate relationship with the IRS. What you're doing dovetails with my interests. I take that resume and just put it to the side. Because yes, I know that you're coming with passion, and yes, I know you're coming with interest, and yes, you've committed to an education. But it's like parenting. You don't have children so that they look good on your hip. It becomes about the client. It becomes about the service. It becomes about the work. And if I don't get that really, really early, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to be comfortable in my office. Because we are about the client, and we are about the work, and we are about delivering excellence. And so if there's not that level of maturity, because it comes, it just, it takes a while nowadays, right? That makes it very difficult for us to begin to, among other things, guide you. To be prepared, I think, one, you gotta work at McDonald's for a summer, right? You gotta do retail, because apparently you have no wiggle room in retail. You have to be on time, you have to perform, you have to do both high-end things and low-end things. So that's a great eye-opener, one. Two, if you're gonna be in the built environment industry, you need to work a summer swinging a hammer. I know a lot of people try and get into offices and so forth and so on. You need to know how to build. Because at the end of the day, you really need to know how things work. That's more important in our office than the software, you need to know how things work, because we're going to continually challenge you with things that you have to figure out. And so if you don't know how things work, you can't figure out things, right? You're going to be very passive in the office. And you might not get the attention that you need. Plus, our job after you graduate is to continue to train you and to guide you, but it's not to teach you. It's a little different, right? So you need to have these skills. The third internship is then, yes, you need to be in a professional office, so you need to know how to negotiate the conversations, when not to just come up to somebody while they're on the phone talking to a client and ask them questions. How you can adjust to the culture of the space, whether it's a big firm or a small firm. And big firms and small firms are very different animals. They're very different animals. The fourth thing I would say is that you have to also have a good sense of your own needs. If you understand how things work, if you can sort of do things well with independence, then I would say, try, don't exclusively put your experience here, but try with a small firm, because they could use your skills and you'll get a broad range of exposure. But if you need more guidance, if you need things in smaller increments, you need to target a big firm, because they are set up to treat you in those increments, right? So part of being prepared is also, being true to yourselves at the moment and understanding what it is. But number one, I would say, is moving to a service mentality. That conditions everything else, in my opinion.
Okay, so you got that a little bit, but there's still a level of insecurity because you're stepping into this new world, okay? And so we're going to talk about the gatekeepers. Leadership in the field of architecture. Who are the gatekeepers? How are we anchoring our young people? So you need support, right? It isn't just about design ownership and diversity or politics. It isn't just about doing the work that architects do and create, but it's also about passing the baton. So in this moment, we want to talk about mentorship. Who's mentoring? And how do you see yourself in this role?
So as mentoring, that's
again, I told you a story about NOMA, and excuse me. So the way that happened is, those professionals saw these young students, and when we came in, they didn't want to really talk to students. They just wanted to really go for work, and they had to take us under the wing. They had to because we were there. So that was my first exposure to mentorship. But then they told me, well, in order to get to our position, you're going to have to do the same for others. So I've been part of this organization for 26 years, believe it or not, I'm 52. And I've been mentoring for almost 20 years. I have about 4 young people who are now licensed. I have 2 young people who have their own firms. And that is because I spoke to these people, I met with these people, and told them about the profession. And it's very important about mentorship. It's just like, your family. In my family, I grew up in a Caribbean household, so it was very important that, we had to do a duty in the household. We had to perform, we had to make sure that whatever my grandfather told me to do, he would take me under his wing to make sure I was at the right level. And the same thing goes in for architecture. And I think going to Elizabeth's point about big and small firms, the small firm will always tend to try to mentor you, even though it's going to be hectic pace, they got to get work out, but there was always going to be somebody there to mentor you. In a big firm, you can get lost in the shuffle, but how you can go against that is you have to find somebody to say, hey, I want to be somebody in this firm. Don't be afraid. It's your right when you come to these firms. I mean, just like we're talking about wage equality right now, fighting for the proper wage. The same thing goes in for a firm to say, I need to be mentored. I want to get licensed. I want to someday become my own professional, run my own firm, and it is your right to do it. And that's the next thing I want to talk about is mentorship is also leading into activism a bit. If you take the role of mentorship and going under a mentor seriously, it'll prepare you for activism. And this profession needs activism right now for what's going on and what we need to do in the next 20 years. So I've been doing it. I will still do it till I retire. And it's just important that you look for a mentor. It's important. It really further your career.
I second what Andrew says. I grew up in a family of architects. My dad was an architecture student when he and my mother got married, and they had children a lot earlier than they planned. So the student life was in the house, and then when he graduated and he became a business professional, we were very much involved in the industry all along. So I was familiar with the industry for a very long time. But for various reasons, I chose not to go back to Jamaica to live and to work. And so I'm very much aware that people took a chance on me. I was a good student, but I wasn't particularly well prepared. And there are a lot of professional things I still kind of struggle with in terms of a lot of different things, right? But you have to understand that part of your professional life is also understanding you will pay it forward. You are obliged to pay it forward. This is what Andrew was saying. And so you have to have and I know this is a little touchy-feely, but acquire the social skills that make people want to help you. This is really important. If you don't have the ability to attract that help, you won't get it, and you're wondering why. So one of the things, people mentor not just because they think it's a good idea, but because it's also gratifying. Andrew immediately said that he's trained young architects. They've gone on to open their own firms. He has an emotional investment in their success. Charles in the back will tell you that there isn't one person who's ever worked for me that I don't stalk on the internet and say, how are you doing? How's it going? What's going on? We build relationships this way so that whenever Andrew sees me, he says, Elizabeth, this project is coming up, that project is coming up. All of these are part of the relationships that we have, right? So you have part of your professional development includes developing those skills. Not everybody's outgoing, and that's fine. Not everybody is, if you're reticent, the benefit to that is a lot of times you are more observant. You're more watchful. So Your personality traits shouldn't stand in the way of your being able to cultivate these relationships. Right? So that's really important. Identifying somebody who will give you the advice you need. And thirdly, be prepared to get advice that you don't want to hear. And even if you hear and you think, well, if they haven't understood what I've said, or I'm not interested in that, first of all, don't reject it out of hand. You know, take it into advisement. You might find that 5 years later, somebody said, oh, they pointed that out to me, and I see now that has some relevance, right? So I would say, in addition to what Andrew said, make sure that you develop that ability to attract the help that you want.
So we're continuing the process. You've gotten the experience, you've identified your mentor, you have years of experience, and so now you feel that you're ready maybe to step out on your own and start your own company. And that can certainly be a very challenging thing, to start your own firm, boosting your career. The rules of the game changes, and there's a whole new world, different dynamics. How can young African American architect students better prepare themselves for business ownership in New York City and elsewhere?
Well, that's a good question, Kathy. Good topic. So New York City is a tough market, no doubt. And prepare yourself for business. Elizabeth probably will speak more to this than I can, but I'm going to tell you from the other side, where I see people coming into ownership and how some people do not perform and some people do perform. So when you're now taking a business under your own, it's your responsibility. So responsibility is the big word here. This is yours. It's got to work. If it doesn't work, it fails. And that's it, it's over. And if you want to start again, you can. But to not fail, you have to know all the aspects of business that you got to put into place to make yourself successful. So first thing you got to do is do the business plan. You cannot start a business without a business plan. So as an African American, Latino, the market is maybe different from how people may perceive us and how we go into business, but it doesn't matter, okay? You have the tools to do what you have to do to make it go forward. And the business plan is the first step. Next thing is you must secure some form of capital. I have seen people go into business and say, Andrew, I went to business and it didn't work. I said, where's your capital? I didn't have any. I just was gonna call some people and get some work. I'm like, it doesn't work that way. Okay, if you really want to go into business, you need capital. And because you're a minority or whatever, it does not matter. Again, you can get capital. And even so, as a minority or other owned business, you can find ways to secure capital, either loans, whatever, or through programs to get your business going. And again, it goes back to mentorship also. Find somebody who's gone through the same process and find out what their pitfalls are, where they almost failed and where they succeeded. Take those notes and find a way that will make your business grow and be successful. So, but I'm going to let more Elizabeth talk about this because she's somebody I've seen during the years really grow her business.
In the 25 years that I've been in business, it's only been this summer that anybody introduced me to balance sheet accounting. Only this summer. We've always done cash basis accounting, right? Money in, money out. But balance sheet accounting goes to what Andrew was talking about making sure that you are actually taking in the whole perspective of all the resources that you have available or not have available to you in order to function. So we're in an odd business. We don't have something that we can go to the bank and the bank can tangibly attach if you don't pay them back their money, right? And I'm one of these people who, having had a business for 25 years, there's certain types of debt I would tell you not to take on. Do not mortgage your house. Do not put your health, safety, and welfare at risk for a business. Okay? make sure that you understand how the cash cycle of a contract. If you work in the private sector, if you work for, whether it's a private developer or a homeowner, right? Your money might be quote unquote on the road for maybe 45 days. You work for the city of New York, we have invoices that are 3 years old. Okay? So you have to understand what that means. You have to do exactly what Andrew says about business planning. And the catch is that there are a lot of resources available to people to start a business, but there aren't enough resources available to explain to people how to grow. Right? So this is where the mentorship comes in. This is where the career path, we didn't discuss this, but to the greatest extent possible, your career path should include some aspects of management. Absolutely. It sounds less glamorous than the design end, but the management is where the rubber hits the road. So in our community, not enough of us are exposed to management. We're exposed to production, right? And we might even be exposed to design, but we're not exposed to management. So that is a key component that I think in our, particularly in our, in most communities, right? Listen, my dad practiced for 50 years. He didn't know about balance sheet accounting either, right? So you have to make sure that you understand this aspect of the business. Again, some of the reasons why we open our own firms have to do with reaching a glass ceiling within a situation. Like there's no other advancement for us in the workplace other than to be out on our own, where we would author more of the solutions that we're putting forward, right? That used to be a more sort of direct sort of situation. We can only get this far in a firm going out on our own. Most people don't necessarily say, I have identified and I can find, and people are clamoring for my services. I have a huge client market out there that is just clamoring to work with me, right? But the first rule of business is sales. The first rule of business is sales. It's not production, it's not printing at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's having that contract. So you have to prove credibility, right? The ability to deliver. The last thing is the creativity.
Literally the last thing.
The last thing is the creativity, right? And to put it in perspective, for those of you who are struggling with design and wondering whether or not this is the career for you, there are lots of ways of being in this profession in a rewarding way, where you're not the genius who's smelling themselves, right? You can make sure that the project gets built. The project architect is far more important than the design architect. The design architect is the one who makes it look great and provides both the signature and the marketing tool to get more of these types of things. But the project architect makes sure that the whole thing is coordinated and it's not going to fall down and kill people. That's an important role to play in a project. The people who understand how to get the job out the door so it can be built, the people who understand how to check submissions, right? And make sure that the contractor is fulfilling the contract. Those are important roles to fill. So you don't have to think that because you're not designing, you're not in the business. Trust me, the people that support the design process are as important, if sometimes not more important. And those roles are.
So we have a new addition to the panel. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your company or where you work at the moment.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon. My name is Ibrahim. I'm the managing partner at Bolt Architecture, a full-service architecture firm in Brooklyn. It was founded in 2012 with my college roommate and I. And in this office, we create spaces that manifest new and innovative ideas. To quickly jump in, one of the reasons why I started my practice is not only was it a dream, I did hit the glass ceiling, as Elizabeth had shared, but it was also an experience of realizing the economy was shifting. I had At the time, I was working on 25 to 30 different projects, so I knew I had the ability. But the money was being spent on spaces that I didn't necessarily feel were going to benefit my own creativity. So in short, I was sent to Rikers, not once, but 3 times. I was sent to Manhattan detention centers, and in that space, I saw nothing but black and brown people who looked like me, and I said, if I'm going to be a part of this, make a decision. Are you going to be a part of this, or are you going to make something more bigger than what this is? I found that I had ethical reasons why I couldn't design these spaces. And I literally, like Dave Chappelle did, went to Africa, got inspired, came back home, and started my practice. I would not be here without the mentoring of Andrew and Elizabeth, who saw me since I was a young kid, some of y'all ages, running around here trying to figure out where I was going to be. And now it's been 7 years. The practice is flourishing. We're a team of 5. We're continuing to grow. We're continuing to look for new people. But the thing that, as an employer, I look for in young individuals is a passion. The passion is important because it really fuels your interest in what you're doing. Yes, there's design. In my office, we have churches, we have renovations, we have a passive house, multifamily, all sorts of projects. So I'm creatively expressed. But at the end of the day, you're going to want a paycheck on Friday. And if you think spending a month of design is going to get you that paycheck, sorry. I have 4 other projects coming down the pipe that I need you to work on too. So you're going to have to manage just as much that I'm managing, in addition to understanding how to value your own time, because you're going to have a life. You're going to want to take exams and get your own profession, hopefully, or a practice, or figure out where you want to go in this profession, whether it's in architecture, doing construction. They're different, doing similar to what Andrew, maybe you decide you want to do landscape architecture. There's a myriad of different things you can do, but you need to have a passion. That's going to fuel your fire. That's going to really just dot your I's and cross your T's. The employer's going to see that you have that passion, that interest, that you're putting in not only those extra hours, but you're volunteering your time coming to NOMA conference. You are, trying to educate the young children who are coming up behind you about what paths to take. You're trying to expand your own repertoire of work because you understand that it's bigger than just this office if you really want to make a difference. So I wanted to make a difference. So in my practice, I hire people who are not only better than me, I think, in a lot of things, but they complement me. And I look for individuals who can manage the understanding of what I like to refer to as the $5 bill syndrome. So if I borrowed $5 from an interview and I said, I'm going to give you $2 now, and I'm going to give you $3 in December, does that sound like a fair deal? Why not? Somebody raise their hand and give me an answer? Why not? Time value of money. $5 in the end of December has no value for me because I already spent the work and the money trying to get you to finish that product. You understand? And if it takes me 4 months to make $5, I shouldn't be in business. You understand? So the second biggest thing I learned for myself as owning my practice is I have to be a businessman or businesswoman. They don't teach you that in architecture school. Most of these schools I learned, it's either you have 2 roles. Typically, you're going to either work for someone or you're going to work for yourself. And understanding how to look at a balance book, having an accountant who's competent to tell you, look, you need to set up this type of corporation so that you can balance or, deduct these types of transactions, and you need to set up workers' comp and all these other things that are you're like, wait a minute, where's all this money coming from? Well, you got to manage that. And what other way to do that is to then develop the bone to literally, similar to what I'm doing now, is to speak on the fly to people and introduce yourself to people. You're going to have to do it. These people, you never know who you may see in 5 to 7 years. They may be your partners. There might be someone who you decide to collaborate with in another state or another region. Collaborate with them now. Share their information. Let them know what you're working on. It's important to share that. You never know who's going to be able to help you get to that next place or the next step or get that next project. It's all about collaboration. So those are my 3, tidbits that I'll leave you with, which is, understand your value. First one. Got the first one. So who's remembers the first one? Time control. And passion, thank you. And passion. That passion has got to keep pushing you. You know, sooner or later, you know, the pretty pictures and the design part of it, it's going to go away. It's going to come down to the nitty-gritty and down to the business. And how are you going to keep your company afloat? How are you going to be the best part of your team or a contributing member of your team? Those are the things that add up, and those are the things that are going to make you valuable.
So Victor Buddy Lawson just walked in the room. He's joining the panel. I'm just going to have him briefly introduce himself, his company, and then we'll move on to the other questions.
Buddy Lawson Associates Architects. We've been around for 26 years. We do a lot of work in affordable housing, new construction, we do a lot of work with universities. I was an academician. I taught at City College, Columbia, and at the Yale Graduate School of Architecture.
Thank you for joining.
Victor's my client.
It's all about networking.
We're working to, he's very polite. but you know, suddenly I get these group, you know, these group phone calls, like everybody on the project is calling up to discuss something. I'm just like, oh my God.
This is awesome. So we move on to the next question. So Black architects around the world have contributed to the environment around us. The overall goal is to improve the profession by bringing different voices and different visions. Without more Blacks and other diverse architects in the industry, we lose an opportunity to be expansive and create a more richer environment. So the question here is, how has the industry changed over the last 5 years? And what do you predict will happen within the next 5 to 10?
That's a good question. Liz, do you have to go?
Wow, five. It's interesting that you said 5 years.
Yeah.
I remember when we did everything by hand. Okay? And sometimes I miss those days, and sometimes I do not. I have a young man in my office. He was with us at the day of service yesterday. He said to me that he's very interested in user interface experience, right? And so it happened that I was reading an article, and so I actually know somebody who's trying to do this, and we were discussing his graduate school opportunities and where he might find a program that both does UI and landscape architecture so he can bring this together. I think one of the things that has happened is that brick and mortar hasn't changed that much. You know, the technology hasn't. I mean, the principles remain the same. The technology is approaching it a little different, and that's why I say you have to know how to build, right? But project delivery is entirely different, and it is so fluid, and it is so fast changing, and it is so expensive. And we were talking about mentoring. We have to have a relationship with you young guns, young blood, because you guys are swimming through this stuff, right? And you know, I won't speak for Victor, right? But all the, you know, Ibrahim is a younger practitioner. He started within the past 10 years, right? Victor and I have been around for 25 and 26 years. Ibrahim is more comfortable with the technology. But even at some point, he's going to find, like, I don't know what's going on
Right now.
One of the things that happens right now is that nobody has meetings. Nobody, you get a flurry of emails and calendar invites, and you're plugging in here, and there's no standardization in the industry. So one person uses WebEx, and another person uses Zoom, and a third person does this, and you have to keep it straight, right? And when you get older, you can't keep it straight. I'm here to tell you, right? So one of the things that's exciting in a way is a change in the role of the senior person. Because the senior person has to rely more on the junior staff just to be able for ourselves to really function. So what we bring to the equation is wisdom, which we always did, but we're like, now we have to be like, you know, the wise person in the office. You have to learn to delegate. You have to know how to bring somebody in. Ibrahim talked about trusting the people that he brings in to see his vision. Because at the end of the day, you know, we talk about it in terms of design, but it's more about the culture of the firm, right? how it sees its relationship with its clients, how it defines its work. You have to bring people in who are on board with that to interpret and form the buffer between all of these changes and what you're trying to do. So we need people who are very, 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 very skilled, not just at pushing the buttons and clicking the mouse, or it might not even be the mouse, you might be just, wearing glasses that you look here and you look there and it might change, right? But being able to understand what the intent is and the need to execute. That's going to change, I think, in 10 years in a way that we can't even begin to imagine.
I'm going to be a little philosophical about this, and it may be helpful and it might not. But we're in the business of change. That's what we do. Everything changes. So I'm 64 now, and I'm still learning. You have to just realize that things are going to continue to change. Especially now that you've got AI, which is artificial intelligence that is growing on its own, that is also changing, and is now becoming competition for human intelligence. So I think, yes, the profession has changed. We used to do things manually, and we used to, do things, by hand. And now there will be a time when, you think it and it becomes real, really quickly. And there are people on this planet who think things and they become real right away because they've got the financial wherewithal, they've got the ability to make things happen. But I think the advantage with architecture is that it allows you to embrace that change, that ability to change. Look, if you look at it, what you do is you take something that doesn't exist, which is thought, and you turn it into material, right? Throughout every process of that, there's some kind of thought that goes through it, into it, and change that comes out of it. So I think if you embrace the fact that you're in the business of change, you'll be able to navigate yourself through this process. One other thing too that I want to say is that even the way you deal with clients has to deal with change, because some people don't want to change. And somehow you have to convince them that the change is good, or you have to figure out a way to show that that change is beneficial to them.
The impact of that change would be.
Exactly. I mean, you look at New York City, it is being recycled, literally. Projects are being recycled. We're working on a project with Elizabeth, as we discussed, you mentioned a few minutes ago. It used to be a detention center. That was demolished, and now it's being made into 740 units of housing with parks and,
Town center.
Yeah, town center and what have you. So I think change is a must. In terms of how the profession changes, I don't know. I mean, we are not really in charge of it. We are just producers. We produce stuff. We produce buildings. But the technology that is used to produce those buildings is really not in our hands. They're in the hands of the guys that develop the software programs that we're using. When we used to draw by hand, we controlled that. But now it's like, okay, today it's Revit, tomorrow it's AI.
And that's absolutely true.
That is correct.
Yeah, so I think how Kathleen phrased this, but how I see change is, it's global. I mean, right now, the world used to be, when I was growing up, was right in front of me. Now the world is around me and further from me. And because of the work I do with local government, I also see change down the road in how they're looking at, their building stock, adaptive reuse. A big thing I see right now is sustainability. I'm working on a project with the county right now. We're doing 20 buildings, ripping all the infrastructure out, changing everything up, LED lighting, new systems, new monitoring systems for the equipment. Now, it may seem mundane, but this is what architects are going to start getting into, because our climate is changing, and that's a big thing we all should think about right now,
okay? And that impact, number one, global, climate, sustainability, and being an architect all comes into hand, okay? It's what I talked about earlier, being an activist. You make the point known that this must be done. If it's not done, if we don't do adaptive reuse for this building, if we don't take this building and make it more sustainable, if we're doing a site and we don't have the proper runoff for drainage and we kill the land or we don't protect our wetlands, this is all going to affect us down the road. So, like I said, before the world was in front of me, what I consumed directly was just for me. Now it's much more than that. So that's why I see the profession going.
So I guess the way I perceive change today is in, if you go to elementary schools and you ask them what they want to be, and an architect is one of their jobs. In New York City, for example, there's a litany of buildings. How many architects outside of the room that you're in have you met? So with that stance, I believe, similar to what the three other my colleagues and mentors have shared, is architects, professionals in this built environment, we need to take a more active approach into how this world is being designed. Buildings are killing people. People are getting sick from buildings. They're producing footprints, carbon footprints that are bigger. I don't need to dive into what's happening with the administration and then their belief about climate change. New York City just had a 90-degree weather day a week and a half ago. So if you don't think it's real, I don't know what to tell you. So, but with that change and that idea that we need to be at the forefront of this change, we need to be available to the community. So, as we shared earlier, being able to speak to people in the community in a language, and I say language slowly because we're educated people. If you ask the average person who went to college what an elevation is or what stormwater runoff is, they're gonna look at you like, what are you talking about? But we speak to them in that language as if they know what we're talking about. So there needs to be almost like a digression, or almost as if a change in the language or an adaptation to the language so that we can explain how important some of these things are to the community, because they don't understand a lot of the impacts of these things, not only for right now, but for 5 to 10 years down the road. So that's the next important change I think we need to start taking that approach to, being at the forefront of change, wanting to see how building design is changing, and how the technology is literally racing with it to foster that change.
So I have a bunch of questions, but again, because of time for Elizabeth, can we have another panel?
I'm so sorry.
I'm going to have her introduce herself before I move on to my next question. And Liz, if you have to leave at 12, I know you have to leave, it's quite okay.
Yeah, then I'll just slide out.
Hi, my name is Sevilla Jackson Preston. I am principal of JP Design, a Harlem-based architectural firm.
So I know this is very thought-provocative, and I would like to continue asking questions, but before I go on to the Q&A, I just want to ask if there's anything that you would like to add to the discussion before I go to Q&A, or should I just move to Q&A?
I know I came late, and because this is an open discussion with young people, for me, I always like to just address people's real lives. I mean, we're architects, and that's our chosen profession, but I see a lot of young women and young men in front of me, and I think that we would do you a disservice if we didn't tell you that this is a demanding profession. I think you understand that in your professional school, studying to become an architect. It doesn't become any easier when you're studying for the registration exam. It doesn't become any easier if you elect, as many of us up here have done, to have a private practice. It's a very demanding profession. People should know that, unfortunately, architects have a very high percentage of divorces. Unfortunately, there is a high percentage of young women architects who never have children or who never get married. So because I elected to have children while I was in architecture school, I have 4 daughters, I just always feel it's incumbent upon me to remind people that, as you pursue your professional life, you should really think and understand where you want to be 20 or 30 years from now. And if you are a young man or a young woman who desires a family and children, you kind of should be thinking now, how does that fit in the same way you think about getting the degree and then passing the registration exam? because very often those things will be in competition with one another. So I think if you think about it more upfront, there may be more hope for many of you than I've seen amongst myself and my colleagues in terms of a life-work balance. But I think that that's important as well.
So Villa, that's very real, and I thank you for that. I'm going to ask for those who have questions, if you can stand and project. If you need the mic, let me know.
Hi, my name is Grace Lynn. I'm an architecture student, and I'm from Houston, Texas. Thank you for making your statement, because I'm an untraditional, I guess you could say, conventional student, because I've had a career, and now I'm about to go to architecture school and going through the process. But what I have found, because I've had my own business already, I have found that when you're trying to start your business, yes, it's very demanding, it's a lot of work, and it does take away from your work-life balance. But I don't think we always talk about how, as women, trying to get contracts, because yes, you gotta have the passion, yes, you have to have all this skill and all that great stuff, but at the end of the day, it is very difficult to get contracts. For you personally, did you utilize any of the MWBE certification programs, WeBank, any of that to help you propel your business, and did it actually help you? And was it time worth spent? And is it even worth it?
I'm probably not the person that should answer that question. My colleagues are like, why would you ask her that? Okay, just starting a business, I did come in and I heard Victor talking about AI. The roadmap has changed. I started my business in 1993, and I tell people that it was a $200 investment. We were still drawing by hand. I had a drafting table. I bought a pack of Mylar. That was it. It cost me $200 to buy a pack of Mylar. I had my pencils. I made $18,000 just drawing in the middle of my living room. And then I took that seed money and went and opened a commercial space, right? Today, I don't think that can really happen, right? So that's one thing. Fast forward in WBE, I don't know about other cities, and this is me speaking personally, I'm not speaking on behalf of NICOBA or NOMA. For me, I believe it's a waste of time. I've been MWBE city certified, state certified, NTA certified. I've never gotten a job from any of that with all the excellence that I have. But I continue to have a successful practice because for me, I at some point decided that I really could maybe focus more on the private sector. So that's not to say that there are not others who have been very successful in those programs. I've done much work with New York City, but not as under quote unquote MW guidelines. So that's what I would say to that. And I think you had a third question here somewhere, but it escapes me. So, yes.
Any other questions? Or did you want to take a stab at it?
I don't know. You're like an artist. This is what you do. At least that's what I've come to realize. I started to practice 3 years before you did, and I would almost say that we were just. If I say when we started, we were at 10%. Now I'd say we're like 30%. But it's what I do. You do it because you enjoy it. You do it because you like to solve problems. You do it because you would like to give back to you're essentially building the world. You're building things that would otherwise not be there. And even though you take a little credit for it, it's the people that benefit from it that will maybe never even know who you are. They would never even know the place was designed by an architect, But the mere fact that you've contributed to that is, look, I'll give you an example. We just finished a project. They're moving into it right now as I speak. Seniors, okay? 63 apartments, 63 units. 27,000 people applied for it. 27,000 people. 63 people got it. Okay, those 63 people are they won the lotto. Literally. And I've just been around them, and you should see the joy in their hearts. But they don't even know who I am. They didn't even know if this thing was designed. It just showed up, I filed, I got the lotto, I won. Now I'm living in this luxurious place from some kind of other place. So I think that's, to me, at the end of the day, that's the benefit of doing this, you know. I have, man, I'll tell you, my daughter is going to law school. She's probably going to be making as much as I am in her first year, or more. So it's a totally different paradigm. You know, you're going after something that is a benefit. You know, it's like if you're an artist, you paint. The joy is not from it comes from what you're doing. It's not the money. Of course, you can get the money, and I'm not saying it's not important. It is very, very important. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it. So you've got to figure out a way to train yourself to be more business savvy, to be more sharp, to be more, to be able to negotiate deals. And you have to do that. Otherwise, you will not be able to do all of the fun things that we talked about. Yes.
I was listening to Victor, and I was struck to say also that I think his passion for the profession comes across when he talks, and that's what you have to have. If you're not passionate about architecture, honestly, go do something else. Because what it takes to be an architect and to do the job well, you have to dig so deep down inside of yourself that it has to be part of your being. Like, I work like crazy, and my friends and my family are always like, you like you work, but I don't even feel like I'm working. Like, you put me in an architecture space, I swear to God, I could be in it 24, 36 hours, and then I'm coming up for air like, what's going on? But I don't feel that I was there for that time, because it's just part of me, it's who I am, and I enjoy it, and I have a passion for it. And so, like I say about the kids and marriage and all of that, I say the same thing. If you really don't have a passion and you think like, oh, I could just as well be a doctor or a lawyer, go do that. Because also the financial rewards for what you will put in, you may not get. And I've seen people become very resentful of the profession, and it hurts me at my heart because it's a profession that I love. So when I meet people who, for whatever reasons, have practiced or been involved in the profession as employees and they've become resentful, I feel bad for them, and I feel bad for architecture, because it's a great space if you really love it and want to work in it. I mean, every day is exciting, so I just would echo what Victor said in that regard.
If I had to just veggie back what the last two shares, or double down on it, collaboration. It's one of my firm principles. You know, one of the ways I got a lot of contracts is not through MBE contracts. It's actually through just calling up a buddy who I knew who became chief operating officer at a big firm, and I was like, "You need an architect? You got a house, right? You moving? What's going on? I'm here. My practice is here. What do you need? You need my W-9 and my deck? Okay, here it is." And 6 months later, I got a phone call, and he's like, "I need you." It's not the greatest type of work, but it put me in the room. And once I got myself in the room, it was like you said, like we shared, do your best. Show everyone that you're qualified. You're in the room for a reason, and the rest is history. And it's been showing, and that's really been how I find myself leveraging my own network to get bigger contracts. It's getting in the car, driving up to Detroit literally 3 weeks ago, and saying, "I don't know anybody here, but Brandon, I heard you up here. Can we meet?" And then Brandon introduced me to this other guy who owns a restaurant who's trying to open up 2 more places. There you go. And that's literally what you have to start doing. And a lot of it has to be, you got to step out of that discomfort, get out of that, I don't know them or I haven't spoken in a while. Listen, if you have a family like I do, I got 2 young kids, 2 young girls. Google Calendar is my best friend. They have their own calendar, so everything is on the calendar. I know where they are today, tomorrow, for the next 2 weeks, and it's scheduled accordingly. So that's the way I've created my balance. But like Zavilla shared, people think I'm crazy when I'm telling them, well, I went to the gym this morning at 2:30 for an hour and a half, came back, wrote my book for an hour and a half, got my girls ready for school, came here to unpack and get ready for the conference, and then I got 4 phone calls and a conference call to do sometime between 3 and 5. That's just the nature of what it is. There's no one gonna be crying, saying, let me rub your feet, or let me help you out. You gotta eat, you better figure out how to make it happen. And that's really what you start to figure out. In whatever city you in, New York, Baltimore, LA, Houston, you know, you're gonna be out here literally running around with not sharks, but sharks, wolves, and lions. And you better be prepared. Because they'll chew you up, spit you out, and say, sorry to tell you this, but, you know, we're moving on. So, you know, be prepared, be prepared.
I saw a hand in the back.
You need the mic?
You need the mic?
Yep.
You can please stand.
Where are you? Okay.
So my question, I've only had more untraditional internships abroad, so I don't really know like the realities of architecture in the U.S. yet. But I'm kind of wondering, is there space for like critical and progressive thought conversation like in the real world, or does that kind of diminish once you get into practice because of like the realities of economy, pragmatism? Like, do you guys think there's still space for that kind of thinking beyond? I know like architects kind of promote that they always do this, but so I don't know how to word it. I hope you know what I'm trying to say. Like, is there still that space? Is it, or does it kind of get dramatically diminished because like we keep talking about business and all these things? Like, how's that balance?
Captain, I think I'll respond to that. I'm not a firm owner, but I work for people. So when I worked in healthcare, the more was home Kettering. So unfortunately, cancer is a very bad thing, but it's a very big thing in the healthcare business. So when I was working at Sloan Kettering for our hospital, we had a $2 billion budget. Just think for a hospital by itself. So we were bringing everything and anything to be designed. So what we did is we started doing hospitality design in healthcare. So that's talking about your wall coverings, carpet, floor covers, things that were never done before. And so the dialogue that we had with the architects working in the room with us was that we want to hear what you have to offer to kind of move us forward in where we want to go. And unfortunately for us, it doesn't happen for a lot of architects. Money wasn't an option. But in a lot of in the profession, our profession, money is the option. I mean, you have a strict budget. You have to be creative with what you have. But you should always, as an architect, let people know how to express your design, your creativity in what you want to do. So if you work, like say for me, I had a large pot of money to draw from, and for being a small firm owner, they have to be creative. Never diminish your creativity or what you want to say to the client to express your design. I think it's important.
Anybody else on the panel?
I could take that. Yes, time is always an issue in architecture because time and money go together, right? So it's very important that you know, when you're working on a project, I find that a lot of good architects lose money on their projects because they spend more time than is budgeted because they want excellence. They want to do the critical thinking that you just mentioned. Because time is, you know, you're dealing with financial people, you're dealing with codes, you're dealing with, you know, laws, you're dealing with, you know, schedules. So to do that, you have to spend a little more time, unless you've already spent time to think about those issues. But because most projects tend to be different from one another, you're doing something custom in each case, you have to figure out a way to be able to bill for it, or you end up spending more time on it. Okay, so, but yes, you know, I think architecture is getting better today than it has ever been. Technology is helping it to get better, both in the way we deliver the projects. For example, you look at BIM, is a system that has enabled where you would have 10 people working on a project, you maybe have 2 people, and all of the consultants are working on the same thing. So it's enabled the delivery to be a lot better so that your ideas can be translated into form really quickly. I wanted to add one more thing, okay? You know, you guys have heard of shoemakers, kids that don't have any shoes, right? Really, what we do, and I go back to the former question, what we do is that we're shoemakers, right? We make things. We make buildings, or we make things. And we make things for other people, but we forget to make them for ourselves, right? So I found that if you know how to make things, why don't you find a way to make them for yourself while you're also doing it for other people? I'll give you an example. I had a partner several years ago, got his family together, bought land, started building houses, and they sold them. And they just continue now. He's a real estate developer, also an architect and a contractor. You have that commodity, you've got that tool. Now you've got to say, okay, how can I monetize it? How can I figure out a way to, while I'm having fun with the architecture, talking about the passion, why isn't it possible that I can actually be a part of the product so that I have a long-term relationship with the product, the building, as opposed to one in which you've just done it, you've finished the job, you've got your CFO, you move on. Now you are part of that. I think that's, as architecture is changing, going back to that first question, because it is changing, because we're losing our roles as the leader of the profession from drawing to now technology, it is very, very important that you commoditize what you have and you realize that it is a commodity that is a very valuable commodity, and you can monetize that on your own.
This is back on a different note, going back to something Victor said earlier, also about your ability to sell to the client, your idea, your thought process. So when you talk about design and how much time one spends and the critical thinking part of it, you know, we also come up against what we quote unquote call design guidelines that when you work in spaces that you're given. Some of these things are like horrible, like really, you know, like you look at it like did a first year architecture student come up with this. So the idea that you have to think that through, you still want to pursue excellence, and then to what degree do you become an activist and an advocate for the end user to say to people, hey, there's some faultiness in these design guidelines and I really don't want to adhere to them to the degree that you would like. You know, here's my proposal and, you know, can I get it through? Because to Victor's point again, you want to make the best spaces that you can potentially make for the people who will inhabit the spaces. And then I would say, time is not our friend. We live in a world where everything is speeding up. You know, when I came into profession, you had, you know, clear sectors. You know, you had pre-design, you had design, you had design development. I don't even think design development exists anymore. You know, I swear, people think because you have a computer, like you press some button and miraculously these drawings appear tomorrow, and are you in DOB? And you're like, as an architect, like thinking how much of this stuff you would like to really think through, but people think because of this age of computer, that a process that would normally have taken 6 or 8 months, they really think like you're gonna have a whole building done in 8 weeks. And you have to like educate them like, no, that is not how this process works. So yeah, it's interesting.
So we are at our time limit. This has really been a very interesting dialogue. I appreciate that everybody came and participated. And I'm hoping that you are able to walk away with more information that you came in with. Hopefully you begin your networking. Hopefully you begin to understand what approaching this career is all about, the tools that you need, the people that you need to venture with, how to network, how to navigate your way through the process. I want to thank you all for being in this space. I want to thank the panelists for indulging and having this really wonderful conversation with you. I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.